Good evening. We would like to remind everyone that COVID-19 is still a danger. Please do not relax safety precautions. Wearing masks, sanitizing, and maintaining physical distance will help you stay safe and healthy. Human Rights Day is observed every year on 10th December, the day the UN General Assembly adopted in 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document proclaiming the inalienable rights that any human is entitled to, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, language, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Available in more than 500 languages, it is the most translated document in the world, and rightly so. The fact that we must have a commission and a document to uphold these basic rights highlights their prevalent exploitation. Good evening and welcome to students, parents, teachers, alumni, and all others watching us live. This webinar is a small window to what many of us have the privilege of enjoying, with, more often than not, oblivion towards those who do not. This year's Human Rights Day theme relates to the COVID-19 pandemic and focuses on ensuring that human rights are central to recovery efforts. The UN's aim is to create equal opportunities for all, address the failures exposed by COVID-19, and apply human rights standards to tackle entrenched, systematic, and intergenerational inequalities and discrimination. At least once in our lifetime, we may need a doctor, a lawyer, a policeman. But every day, 3 times a day, we need a farmer. Let us, on this day, heed the cries of our farmers. If not physically, let us ensure we are with them in spirit as they raise their voices for their rights. To bless our efforts in knowing more about inequality around us, let us seek God's presence. I request Ms. Sheena Sam to lead us in prayer.
Please join me in prayer. O loving and benevolent Lord, you are the source of all life. Today, as we celebrate Human Rights Day, we pray for your compassion and your strength to treat everyone around us with equality and dignity. Extend the grace of your healing hands on the battered souls of those unfortunate so that they may have the peace and answers that they seek. Give us the courage to become the beacons of light and dispel the darkness of inequality and injustice that prevails in this world. Help us remember that we are your children and open our minds to heed, respect, and celebrate each other's beliefs and opinions within our families, schools, workplaces, cities, across countries, and also be reflected in the lives of those who govern this land. Grant the youth the courage to stand up for themselves and become the people they want to be, not constrained by this world's perception, but guided by your will and spirit. Merciful Lord, keep safe the vulnerable people in this world, the poor, the needy, the desperate, the elderly, the lonely, the depressed, the homeless, the enslaved and the exploited. Give us your grace to treat all of them as equals and equally deserving of our care. Increase our awareness and concern for their needs. Bless the angels in disguise who work tirelessly and advocate the rights of the people who are ignored, denied, or abused, the ambassadors of peace and justice who fearlessly voice their opinions of the unheard, and the almost invisible sections of society, the warriors who fight for the exploited, violated, and trafficked, and defend the needy. Hold them in the palms of your loving hands and nurture and protect them in their endeavors. Breathe your love into this fractured world full of hatred and violence, and fill it with hope, love, and peace, so that everyone may live free from conflict and a life free from fear, where every man, woman, and child gets equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. This we ask in your gracious name. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Sheena. In the words of Warren Bennis, leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. Our principal, Father Sunil Fernandez, exemplifies this. I request Father Sunil to welcome the virtual gathering.
Good evening, dear students, parents, staff, and alumni, and a very warm welcome to all of you at today's program on human rights. It was after the Second World War that the Charter of Human Rights was created and published on this very day in 1948. The Indian Constitution lays emphasis on our freedoms and human rights. Let us remember that the term freedom and human rights cannot be separated. One person's freedom cannot be at the expense of another's right to freedom. In a democracy, it is important that we all are educated in these matters and so form a literate and informed society. Only if we know the truth can we think and question our society and government. Lack of knowledge is a dangerous thing, and today, more than ever, with social media, to differentiate between truth and lies, it is critical that we stay informed. We are indeed fortunate to have with us today Mr. Choudhary Ali Zia Kabir, Supreme Court Advocate and Director of Human Rights Law Network. We look forward to listening to his views and have an interactive session with him. I am sure we will all benefit greatly from his talk. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Kabir, and all the participants of this webinar. Let us all stand with all those in our country and beyond whose rights have been violated, who are not allowed to communicate, and whose voices are not allowed to be heard. Let us pledge to practice human rights in our daily life. Thank you. Have a pleasant evening and enriching webinar.
Thank you, Father. To enlighten us more about the significance of the day, we have Advocate Choudhary Ali Zia Kabir speaking to us. I request the Vice President of the PTA, Mr. Clifton Pinheiro, to introduce and welcome our speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Deepa. It is my privilege to welcome Mr. Choudhary Ali Zia Kabir, Director of Human Rights Law Network, New Delhi. Starting from humble backgrounds, Mr. Kabir attended University of Legal Studies and Law, New Delhi. He was very active even in his university days, president of the debating societies and attending moot courts and active as an senior under officer in NCC. In university, Mr. Kabir chose this profession to be an advocate. He saw the underprivileged. He witnessed the suffering, and this made him go into the path influenced by socialism and choose to choose the profession of being a lawyer. Mr. Kabir finished his graduation in 2014 and started with general litigation. By 2015, he was sure that he made the choice that human rights will be his path. And he has worked pro bono on several various causes affecting our nation and mankind. Mr. Kabir is a director specifically of the Right to Housing Initiative at Human Rights Law Network. He has worked with several destitute people, specifically like 10 people living in 10 slums, and ensured that they are not thrown to their destitution. He believes that a right to housing, and it is the government's job to see that people are not thrown onto the streets. Mr. Kabir has also worked with the internally displaced refugees, working with the tribals who were faced ethnic conflict and were migrated to Tripura from Mizoram. He worked for their rehabilitation, security, their status, and their ration. So it is Mr. Kabir's belief that we are all part and a product of the larger society. We have to give back. It is our duty to give back. And also that we need to live this world a better place, which is less discriminate and less barbaric. Having said all this, in his free time, Mr. Kabir loves philosophy, literature, loves a good conversation, and is a developing gardener too. It is my pleasure and privilege to welcome Mr. Kabir. Mr. Kabir, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Clifton. And I'm so pleased to be here. I shall come straight to the point. I propose to appear here as an advocate before you all, and I take you all as a judge and jury, and to make out a case for your increasing participation in the human rights work. With your permission, I'd like to begin to emphasize the nature of human beings. Humans are social creatures. This we all know. A human infant has the longest time period when he is dependent upon his parents for his survival. A human child is most helpless compared to, say, a baby snake or a baby crocodile or a baby turtle. They know instinctively how to survive in life and to move towards sea or to move towards water. Compared to this, human infants are most helpless. They're entirely dependent on their parents. Moving on, as adults, it is my case that we are entirely dependent upon society. Now, a thing that is both a boon as well as a curse is that human mind is designed to think of the clear, present, and immediate things. We are not designed, genetically speaking, in such a manner that we could naturally see very long into the future. And therefore, what often happens is that things which are available all around us, things which are available easily, we tend to stop noticing those things. For example, air, water, or even a home. So long as you have plenty of air around you, you do not realize its importance. So long you have water for yourself, you don't miss the water. So long as you have a comfortable house, you do not know how important it is, or you do not recognize it often. In the same way, society is very important for human beings. We are entirely dependent upon society for our survival. Modern theories of politics, and particularly liberalism, often persuade us to believe that we are free to choose and we are the makers of our own destiny. And it really depends upon us how we work and how we perform ourselves. And it's not much dependent upon the rest of the society or external factors. Today, I would wish to make a case against it. I would wish to make a case that how societies are important as much as our own individual selves, if not more. So, like air and water and food and housing, society is that thing which we often take for granted. And unless we are in a terrible society, we do not feel the need for a good society. Now, the another problem is that society often around us changes very slowly. It changes so slowly that we fail to notice that it has changed. A common phenomena that you would notice is that you would often feel lonely when you are in a different country. What happens really is that the society around you is immediately changed. This change is quite sudden over a course of a day or two or three when you were traveling. And that's when you notice that there is something odd around you. Many people are not able to adjust in different societies and miss and long for their homeland. So society is very important. Society determines who you are, and society is the thing which helps you in determining who yourself are. I'll attempt to say it in another way. Every aspect of our personality is determined by society. How we sit, how we talk, how we eat, what we wear, what language we speak, also even what gods we believe in. So human beings do not have natural instincts like many other creatures. At birth, we do not know as to what to do for our own survival. We are totally dependent, and all of our behavior is learned. This is simple sociology. This is simple genetics. We don't have much programming in there. We learn all those skills. We have seen examples of human beings which were deprived of societies, raised with animals, and they fail to develop speech. They fail to develop anything in which we can identify them as human beings. So we are totally dependent on our society. Now, knowing that we are totally dependent on our society, the natural deduction is that one should be extremely caring towards the society. And if one has to fix oneself, one has to necessarily fix the society. That is the most common logical deduction. Now, the question is, if that be so, then why are we not working towards society as much as we ought to? Or why do people usually not care much about society? Why is it that in our drawing rooms, we are often talking about our own careers, our own businesses, our own trades, our own professions? You would hardly hear us normally, human beings, talking about the state of society and making plans to fix the society, at least not with as much determination as they would be making plans to fix their fledgling business or to increase their profits or to become better in their respective professions. Well, the answer to that is the concept of tragedy of commons. Now, tragedy of commons simply means this, that all those resources that are shared between human beings, we tend to, by a sense of mistrust and a sense of selfishness, abuse the common good. Simplest way to understand it would be a pond in a village. And if all the villagers know that in order to ensure the supply of fishes, each one of the 10 households can take only one fish a day. And more than that, the population of the fish will dwindle. All these notions and examples which I speak before you are the classic examples of understanding this particular concept. So these 10 households, there is a pond in a village, and it's a common property. And it's decided that, look, it's our shared property, it's our shared heritage. We should utilize it in such a manner that it survives longer. And each household agrees to take only one fish out of that pond. Now, what happens is that each of these individuals, over a course of time, start mistrusting each other. One, and second, a strain of selfishness takes place. And then these individuals will, I would think that instead of taking one fish, why not? I should take 2 fishes or 3 fishes, because I believe my neighbor is not very honest, and he probably is going to do the same. And in any way, if the fishes die out, whatever we will suffer will be suffered by everybody else, while the gains for taking 3 fishes instead of 1 will only be mine. This is the selfish nature of human beings. But this selfish nature of humans are often countered by the another diametrically opposite nature, which is altruism, where we naturally believe, this comes naturally to many or most of us, is that we should look after other people too. So there is always a tussle between our selfishness and our altruistic nature. On the one hand, we somehow instinctively, whatever little instincts we have, know that society is important and therefore we should do things to preserve society and other human beings because without them we would be lonely. On the other hand, within a society, we are constantly in a race to be on the top. We constantly want to be better than the other human beings. So this tussle goes on. Now, in any case, then whether we are selfish, and if we are selfish, then we want to, for the purpose of rising on top. And if we are altruistic, then for the purpose of preserving society. The fundamental question, which has always been before the human race, the basic question, the basic political problem, is how to organize society in the best possible manner. If there is anything common between all the political theories, between all the political systems, between all the religions, it is this, that all of them are attempting to answer the question that how societies ought to be organized so that human beings can achieve their maximum potential, how to organize them on the basis of justness, on the basis of rights. Now, this question we have been dealing with as a race, as a humanity, as a species, I beg your pardon. We're dealing with this question from almost as early as we had organized ourselves into tribal groups. And if I speak secularly here, that means, say, about 50,000 years ago, when we started joining ourselves into these small tribes. This question arose there, how to organize a tribe. And as our societies, beginning from these small tribes, to kingdoms, to empires, to nation states, and today's global community, as our societies have increased in size and complexity, the question also was visited and revisited by every successive generation, each attempting to answer it in such a way that that answer is something which is universally acceptable. So, ladies and gentlemen, so far I have talked about that how man is a social creature, how humanity needs society. Human beings are totally dependent on society and they have no existence without their society. I've already said that how, because society is omnipresent, it's always there for you. And if there is any change, it is often very gradual. We fail to acknowledge its importance because it's so constantly available. We fail to acknowledge its importance unless we are deprived of it, say a solitary confinement. Then I have spoken about the tragedy of commons, that despite knowing everything, why we sometimes tend to choose to act selfishly, and while at other times we act altruistically. Finally, I have spoken about the fundamental question, which is how the society must be organized. And that's the question we have always been dealing with. Now, there are several ways. When we realize that we have to organize society in a particular manner, it is but clear that there will be certain rights, there would be certain laws, certain rules. And the law is simply this. It is a duty upon one person, one individual of the society towards other. That's the basis of any law or any rule. Famously said that my right to swing my arm stops where your right to not have a bloody nose begins. So that's the fundamental basis. That's how we attempt to organize society. All religions, all political theories give certain rights and certain duties upon individuals. Rights and duties are the two sides of the same coin. The Western perspective has almost always been more in the language of rights, while if you talk about the Indian perspective, it has more been towards duty, that this is your duty. Well, what is my duty is nothing but my fellow human beings' right. So if I am under duty not to be violent, it is the right of all the other members of the society to have a peaceful society. So therefore, now we come to the understanding of rights. Now the question was that how should it be decided that what rights people have and what should be the basis of rights? And there were different thinkers in different times, different theories, and even different religions who attempted to answer it. Well, the first understanding of rights per se, or call it human rights, any right which is for human beings are simply human rights, arise in Aristotelian thought, where we talk about the natural right theory. and the world and the thinkers attempted to answer that right is that which naturally exists. It is something very intrinsic to human beings, which you have only because you are a human being, and you have it by birth, irrespective of anything else. So that's called the natural rights theory. Now, the problem with natural rights theory, and this is a theory which is quite prevalent, even most of the people today attempts to answer what human rights are and why you should care in terms of the natural rights theory. And it is said that it is something which is inalienable. But at the core of it, it lacks a bit of an explanation, and it is somewhat vague. Now, who will decide this? That what are natural rights? In the state of nature, whether man is a wild animal, and when I say man, I mean to say humanity. In the state of nature, whether we are wild animals or whether we are very caring for other human beings, it's anyone's guess. So what is the basis of it? What is the meaning of natural rights? Why are certain rights inalienable to particular human beings? Why should it be like this? So there were some of the questions which the natural rights theory failed to answer. As we moved forward in terms of our education and civilization, the next attempt to define what rights are were the Christian philosophers of the West, and at the same time, around the same time, the Eastern philosophers in India, China, and rest of the world. The new solution was, and this was an age where religions were crystallizing, where the concept of God was not well accepted. It has always been there in the humanity, but it was becoming much more sophisticated. There were much more detailed explanations, an attempt at logical explanation of the concept of God. And therefore, the divine theory of right comes in. And the philosophers attempt to explain, religious philosophers mostly. And they said that, look, people don't believe in these natural rights, and there is so much violence around us, and we have to explain something. And then the divine theory of right says that there are certain essential rights which are given to all human beings by God. And therefore, you cannot take away these rights from your fellow human beings, because you would be committing an offense against the gods, because these rights are divine. Could you connect the charger, please? Because these rights are divine. So that's the divine theory of rights. And divine theory of rights prevented all these theories with their own limitations in their own time did much good. So the divine theory of rights also tried its best to make the world a better place. All of these theories were aimed at that. But another question, the question which the divine theory of rights, the second theory of rights which I talk about, failed to answer, is that what about those people who believe in different gods? My God might feel it is all right to sacrifice a fellow human being. So now, if there are different religions, there are conflicting understanding of rights. And how should these conflicts be resolved? And then, of course, the question is, what about those people who do not believe in gods, perhaps? What about the secularism? So there were certain limitations with the divine theory of rights. These limitations were answered by even better understanding. And the major school of thought has been the social contract theory. Now, the social contract theory simply says that the basis of rights and duties, the basis of human rights, if you call it, is not nature and it is not God. It is simply that when we are part of a society, we enter into a social contract. We enter into a social contract with each other where we agree that, look, we will surrender some of our freedom to kill anyone we want, our freedom to wear anything we want, our freedom not to wear anything we want. So we will accept some of the customs of the society that we live in, and we put this limitation on our liberties in exchange for having protection. Because there is protection in numbers, that's why the human beings form societies. When you form societies, you surrender certain liberties and independence But that liberty and independence is surrendered so that you can have certain other rights, which is safety. Safety for your body, safety for your person, for your property, right to be not subjected to random acts of violence. And therefore, it really is a social contract. And therefore, human rights are important. Human rights exist because there is a social contract between all the members of a society. This theory also laid down the basis of many a nation state in Europe, in America, in rest of the world. Many nation states were formed on this basis, and this also gave rise to democracy in the years to come. But there was a certain aspect of vagueness about this too, and it was pointed out that this is assumption. Well, when anyone takes birth, they don't consciously choose to enter into this social contract if it exists. And what if I wish to vary the terms of this social contract? And this is not a contract because I entering into this social contract is almost mandatory because there is no man's land left in the world. So there were certain difficulties and vagueness about this particular idea too. The another attempt to explain the understanding of human rights was the utilitarianism. Utilitarianism says, with mathematical precision, that look, if you have to understand what human rights are, you have to realize that the only aim before us is simply this, that we have to organize societies so that maximum people can have maximum happiness, maximum good of the maximum people. And therefore, that's the basis of rights. If you have human rights, then the maximum people will benefit. Now, the problem with this was that it had what we classically call the problem of 99. Now, if what is maximum good for maximum people is to be determined by the maximum number of people, then what about those people who may have a little different understanding? So suppose a society is organized with 100 individuals. Is it all right for 99 people to agree to kill the 100th man and say that if we kill him off, we will save the resources and we will make life better? I'm told my voice is fluctuating. Is my voice clear, sir?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now, the next thing is the utilitarian theory, utilitarian definition of human rights. This is simply this, that maximum good of the maximum number. But the problem with this is that if we only talk about the maximum good of maximum number, we can very easily sacrifice the 99th person, the problem of 99. The 99 people can agree among themselves and decide to kill the 100th person off, preserving resources for the 99. The next 90 might decide to kill the remaining 9. The next 50 might decide to kill off the 40 minority. So therefore, this did not make logical sense. Now, the final attempt which is made to define human rights, to understand human rights, to explain them, that what human rights are and why they should exist, is done by analytical thinkers, led by the philosopher John Rawls. And this is the school of thought which I'm most inclined to agree with. It simply says that if one has to understand what human rights are, one simply has to tell oneself that what kind of society one wishes to live in if we did not know our original social position. It's something like this. If I were to die today, and I were to be born in a society 10 years from now, and I was not aware at what social level I shall take birth, that means, will I be born rich or will I be born poor? Will I be born a disabled person? Will I be born a woman or a man or a transgender? Or will I be born in India? Which race will I belong to? Which caste will I belong to? Now, if I don't have this information about the social factors of my birth, which will take place 10 years from today, Now, what kind of a society I would want to build in these 10 years if I didn't know where I'll take birth? This is what they say, a veil of ignorance. That if you don't know your position in a future society, what kind of society you would want to build? Now, the sensible answer to that is that instead of putting it on gamble, instead of leaving it on chance, not knowing how, in what circumstances I'll be born, instead of hoping that I will be born in an influential position in society, any sensible person, the most logical thing to do is to make every level of society just and better. So if I don't know, if I have the fear, or yes, if there is a possibility that I might take birth as a woman, I shall make sure that women have rights in that society of the future. If I don't know to which religion I will be born into, I shall attempt to make sure that no matter which religion one belongs to in that society, they have equal rights. They have equal protection of laws. They're not persecuted for their religious belief. If I don't know what would be my economic status, whether I would be rich or whether I would be poor, I would want that society to have universal health care. I would want that society to have an egalitarianism. I would want the state to provide for those people who cannot provide for themselves. Now, if I don't know whether I'll be born a healthy person or will I be born with some manner of disability, I would prefer to have a society where the disabled people are not discriminated. They're also given equal opportunity to grow and develop. So this is called the veil of ignorance. And simply put, if one has to ask oneself, what are human rights? Human rights are those rights which you would prefer every member of that future society to have, in which you would be born, and you do not know which social position you will be born into. So that's the easiest way to understand human rights, in my humble opinion. Now, the next question is, if that's the human rights, then the duty is cast upon us today that we should make sure that the society of the future, we should start building today. We have to take steps and we have to give it back to the society so that the society is organized in such a manner that there is fairness, equality, and justice for every individual being, irrespective of which level of social or economic class they belong to, or ethnic, religious, racial status they have. So those are the human rights. Now, essentially speaking, the fundamental qualities that we look for is A, there should not be discrimination in that society, and B, there should not be inequality in that society. So we want a society which is equitable. We want a society which is non-discriminatory. So these are the two ways. Now, there are a number of questions. Right. Now, there are a number of questions when we often speak about human rights. Then instead of giving these vague notions that these are divine or these are natural and inalienable, we attempt to explain human rights. That these are simply things that you would want for yourself. Treat others as you would want to be treated yourself, not knowing how you would be born. When often an appeal is made to people that they should work towards human rights, they should contribute towards human rights. Some of the common oppositions encountered, some of the common questions raised are these, which I shall say now, and I shall also attempt to explain this. Now, one of the first questions is that why should we work for human rights? Many individuals say that, look, why am I supposed to work for human rights? I need to work for myself first. If I want to help the society, I should begin by helping myself. Now, the answer to that is that, well, before that question, the fundamental question often is that why should it be me and why not my neighbor? Why should I be wasting my time, energy, resources, which I can utilize to make myself happy instead of having this general work for the society? Well, the answer is this duty belongs to everyone. And you can make yourself only so much happy. You can make yourself only so much better without making the society around yourself better. So you would come across these self-help books, which often goes about saying that 12 rules for life, 5 rules for life, 10 rules to change your life, which often begins something like this, which asks you to focus on yourself, that you have to work harder, you have to earn a lot of money, there are certain economic indicators you'll have to achieve. This is a false notion. Our happiness do not belong only upon ourselves. It also belongs upon the society that we live on. If there is anything which the present pandemic has taught us, it is simply this, that you cannot yourself be resilient if everybody around you is not. What have we seen in this pandemic is that while there are some people who can easily quarantine themselves or stay in their houses or observe the lockdowns, there are several millions others who don't have this opportunity. So if we have to control the pandemic, it's not about few people who are in an economic position to keep themselves at home, but it's about everybody ought to be in a position to keep themselves at home. Another example, let's say you are a citizen of North Korea. Now, if you want to make yourself happy, you essentially have to work towards making that society more liberal. If you work for 10 hours already, you cannot take your life far away by working one extra hour. You cannot work for the 11th hour and you feel that if I work 10 hours today and I'll start working 11 hours, my life will become much more better. That is the myth that we are all being fed by I shall say it, capitalism. So the answer to the first question is that even if you wish to work for yourself, even if you're selfish and you want to make yourself happy, you cannot make yourself happy unless the society around you is also happy. Poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. If your neighbor is hungry, if he is starving to death, sooner or later, he is going to come to your house. And when the odds are so bad that it is almost as risky for him to die of starvation than to commit a crime and take some of your wealth away or some of your bread off, he will. And it's the most natural thing for him to do. So therefore, work for society, even if you want to work for yourself. The second question, which is often raised, is that, look, okay, fine, I will work for the society, but I should like to work for myself. After all, I need to equip myself to be in this position where I'm able to help anyone. Let me save myself. Let me help myself. Let me have this job. Let me have this career. Let me have this much wealth. Let me first have a house. Well, this is a slippery slope argument. How do we decide that how will you decide that this is the point by which you have helped yourself enough? How do you decide that this much skills, this much wealth, this much savings are sufficient for you to now start working for society? Is there a parameter that you have given to yourself that, look, when I will have, say, savings of 10 lakhs, that's when I will stop worrying about myself and start working for society? Have you given such a limit to yourself? If you've given this limit to yourself, is there any logical basis for this limit? Do we see in the world around ourselves people giving this limit? We have only two kinds of individuals: those who choose to work for others and those who choose only to work for themselves. You would see, and it is often highlighted, it is often discussed, it is often portrayed, and there is an element of truth in it, that you would walk through the street and you will find a homeless man who will be feeding his meager food, who would be sharing his meal with a stray dog. That's his kindness. Well, he's not waiting to feed himself enough first. He's not waiting to gather resources for himself first before helping the fellow creature, his fellow creature who shares the earth with him. So this argument is lopsided. There is no limit when you will feel that you have helped yourself enough and you have saved enough. So therefore, not only you should work for human rights, but you should work for human rights today, from today, whatever be your status. The next question, which is often posed to us, is that, all right, I would really like to work for the society, but I'm no human rights activist. So I don't know how I can help. I can only help by, suppose I'm a banker or I'm a plumber. I don't have the skills to help the society. This is also a myth. Working towards human rights is not supposed to be a professional work in the sense that this ought not to be reserved for few individuals in a society. There is a certain dichotomy in the title of a human rights activist. It isn't supposed to be that a very minute proportion of the society is supposed to label themselves as human rights activists and then work towards human rights. It's a duty cast upon each one of us, and each one of us is capable in our own manner. There is no profession which you can practice without working for human rights. If you are it is true, it is given, it is accepted. There are few professions in which you can work a lot more for the society than other professions. But there is no profession where you simply cannot work. If you're a teacher, of course, you can work a lot more for the society. If you're a teacher, you can contribute towards human rights by educating underprivileged children. If you're an advocate, if you're a lawyer, you can work towards human rights by giving your legal services to the marginalized sections of society. Pro bono. Now, you might say, I'm neither a teacher or a lawyer, I'm a plumber. I only fix taps. What can I work for human rights? Well, if you're a plumber, you can always go to somebody's house and fix their water system and fix their tap. If you are a cook, you could volunteer for the marginalized people of the society. You could cook for them. If you're a banker, you could find some ways to provide credit for the underprivileged proportion, underprivileged members of society, so that they can invest into their future, get back upon their feet. So no matter in what circumstances you are in life, no matter what your profession is, no matter what your social or economic standing is, you can always work for human rights. And working for human rights is not something that you should plan and you should do. Working for human rights is something which you should do today. It's not tomorrow or a day after. I would like to recap as to what I have spoken in the previous 30 minutes. I have attempted to explain that how human beings are entirely dependent upon their societies, the societies in which they exist, and therefore if they have to make their own lives better, they will have to make the societies better. And in the modern world, society is the whole world. In this connected, globalized world, everyone is part of our society. I have also attempted to explain that what is the meaning of human rights? What is the explanation of human rights? Why should they exist? I've spoken about that how we have different age has seen different societies, different philosophers who have attempted to answer this question in different ways. We have the natural rights theory. We have the divine rights theory. We have the social contract theory. We have the theory of utilitarianism. And finally, we have the theory of analytical understanding, which simply says this, that human rights are nothing but those rights which you would want every member of the society to have, in which you are going to take birth without knowing your social or economic position. Next, I have attempted to answer that what are the common hesitations towards human rights, hesitations, reasons which we give to ourselves, the reasons by which we attempt to explain ourselves, that why we are not working for human rights, why we are totally concerned with our own respective careers. One of the reasons is that, why should I be working? Why someone else is not working? Well, everybody has to work. Another reason is that I don't have enough for myself. I have to help myself first before I help society. That is also not correct. You're always in a position to help society, and you have to begin today. Another reason is that I don't have the necessary skills. I don't have the profession. That is also not true. No matter what our profession, what our skills, it is always possible for us to work towards human rights. and it is always possible for us to work towards human rights from today. With that, I'd like to take questions if there are any.
Thank you, sir. Your words have certainly uplifted and motivated us to know more and work towards the betterment of our fellow human beings' lives. The question you raised about organizing society has surely made us think about our actions as individuals. It's time now for some interaction with the audience, and we have a few questions to help us delve deeper into today's theme. First up, we have Miss Meera.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kabir. Seminar yesterday, and I think between that and you, I'm quite, motivated to do my bit. But sometimes when I teach, even as a teacher, I keep wondering. I mean, even these farmers, they are fighting against for what they want. And I was discussing this, and sometimes I get scared for myself, for them, because primarily I come from a family. I need to support my family, and how do we get over this fear? Because we see these police coming and shooting and whatever, tear gas and whatever, beating people up. How do we get over that fear of doing something when we want to help society? Yeah.
Right. So if I understand, the question is that, look, I'd like to work for human rights, but it's so terribly fearful. The
Yeah.
police, the state. That's assuming that question depends on the understanding that whenever you are working for human rights, you will be in conflict with the powers that be.
Yes.
I'd like to attempt to answer this question in two manners. One, it is possible to work for human rights in a non-confrontational manner, if so you choose. For example, if I'm a teacher, I can always go and educate children. And that's where I can inculcate a respect for the rights of other human beings. Now, I agree that sometimes to bring a bigger change, we are in a conflict. Well, then one has to ask oneself that fear always exists in life. And the answer to that, I'm afraid, is more of what you usually hear from saintly and godly people. There is no running away from fear. You are always afraid. But the bravery lies not in those people who are never afraid. Bravery lies in those people who are afraid and yet choose to do the right thing. There's a classic Greek myth of, I believe, Hector and Hercules. Achilles and Hector. Well, these are two different individuals. One is a man who's very strong and divinely ordained, has all the powers, and he has no fear. And he goes to the battle and fights. His adversary is a very ordinary person. He's very much afraid. He has a family, he has a son, he has a wife. And despite all those things, he chooses to step forth into the battle. So I think we should all take inspiration from Hector and not from Achilles. The fear is always there. There is always something at stake. But we should take pride in ourselves that we are doing good. If we incur any risk, it's for a good thing. And then there are so many people like us. I mean, I have come across so many activists in my profession. And I'm bad with names usually. So many, yes, the credit cannot be denied to them. So many missionary people too, who go to these villages, who are very much educated, who can choose to have a very comfortable life in a city, in a foreign country or elsewhere. But they choose to go to these villages, choose to engage themselves, put their lives on risk. I have some of my colleagues who have degrees from some of the fanciest universities in the world, Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, Harvard. And after taking their degree, they have gone back to work in their various villages. They are arguing with the district collector that how he should help the people there. I have a colleague who went to the police station, who goes regularly to the police station and says that please register an FIR because this person's goat has been stolen. This person's chicken has been stolen. And the policeman is usually like, why are you wasting our time? And then she explains, she's an advocate that, look, this is everything for this man. And they are fighting cases for the people. So fear is always there, madam. but we should take comfort in the fact that we are all together in it. I hope I've been able to answer to some extent your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much. God bless you, and God bless us also to fight for what we think is right. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is from Ms. Reshmi.
Hi, good evening. It was a great speech, sir. I have just one question. So this is in keeping with the recent arrest of an artist known as the Sanitary Panels. And she was arrested even though she used a non-violent medium, art. And she drew comics about a certain TV personality who was arrested. She also spoke about the farmer protests. So how doesn't this infringe on our basic human right to the freedom of speech? And when I exercise it as a lay person, when do I know how far is too far?
Right. It is a complicated question to answer. Also, I'm not entirely sure that what limitations are there in that platform. So I understand your question is that how do I know when I'm infringing the freedom of speech? When am I not? What is my freedom of speech and what isn't? If you ask me personally, now this is the greatest debate which our country is facing today, that what constitutes a freedom of speech? And the stakes are high on either side. We don't want to curtail. Right. Now, on the one hand, so freedom of speech is the biggest debate which the country is facing. On the one hand, we have these certain news channels where people speak in a particular manner, where particular communities are vilified, where particular professions are vilified at times, where particular individuals are vilified. The question one asks oneself, that is that freedom of speech? Is that all right to make wholesale allegations in public? On the other hand, and we feel like that the freedom of speech should be limited and should be curtailed. On the other hand, we have these individuals which are criticizing the institutions of state mostly, and criticizing institutions of state with some semblance of logic. There is some semblance of logic even from the opposite side. So this great debate is on. And if you ask me, I believe that cartoonist has exercised her freedom of speech, and there is nothing wrong for what she has done. And I disagree with the actions which are proposed to be taken by the state to put them on trial. On the other hand, I would believe that if there is an area where we need to control freedom of speech, that area is many of these individuals who give fiery speeches and vilify particular individuals, communities, and professions. So that's there. Now, the question which is asked that, how do I know? How much can I speak? If I have to answer you as your advocate, well, I will tell you, well, try and speak respectfully, but say as much as you would. Not only it is your right, but it is a duty cast upon you. If I have to answer your question as an activist, I would say speak as much as the risk you are willing to take. And there are people who are rotting in jail, who are denied sippers, who are denied straws, who are denied clothing for exercising their freedom of speech. So this cartoonist and those people, Father Stan Swami is one of them. For me, the activist part of me takes them as an inspiration. And for that, I feel that, look, if by speaking truth, I would have to go to prison, then I should be ready for it. So as a lawyer, I'd say speak politely, respectfully, but say it all. As an activist, I'd say that if you feel it is right, you should speak it. Truth shall be your defense.
I think what I say in my class when I promote democracy among my students is to speak their mind and yet be respectful. So I suppose it is the answer that you gave for real life as well. Good to know the classroom is out there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Our next question comes from Ms. Manvi.
Question is, schools are restrictive as we can't allow students to do as they please. So how do we teach human rights as it is a bit contradictory?
Right, Narendra. So if I understand your question, that the courses are restricted. How do I teach human rights when the education policy is determined by the state? And I have to teach what I'm asked to. The question is that our lives are limited. So how do we work for human rights? But we have to nonetheless. That's what I have been pleading. So therefore, even if your course are restricted, you can always make that extra 15 minutes, 20 minutes outside your job. I mean, one of the things which was taught to one of my mentor was this, that look, in life, always do your job and a little extra. So he says, if you're a teacher and if you're teaching children, that's something for which you're paid for. I speak a bit candidly, I hope you don't mind. If you're a lawyer and you do cases and you take your legal fee from the client, that's your job. That's what you do. It is not anything which you are doing for the society or for which you deserve praises. The idea is to do your job in a little extra, which means spend that time with children for which you are paid, and then spend a little extra time with children to teach them what you really want to. Many of the things that I have learned has always been taught by my teacher outside the course curriculum. It was outside the course curriculum in the evening that they called everybody in the university or even in school sometimes, and they said, look, I'd like to take some time and tell you about this. So my request to you is that even if you have a very tight schedule and a very tight course, I believe outside that tight course, you can always make some time. And there's another way, if one is a teacher. Whenever one is teaching a subject, while one has to pass on the information and knowledge, but one also has the opportunity to give the perspective, to give both sides of the coin, to present the debate to the young mind. I believe that if we want human rights to be respected, all that we have to do is to tell the whole truth to the people. And most of the people will choose to work for them. So for example, if we are talking about, say, I don't know, it might get a little bit controversial. So if you're talking about the caste system, for example, one can teach the students that, look, now you may belong to a particular caste. Now just look around yourself. How many friends do you have from the underprivileged community? Look around yourself. What is the socio-economic makeup of your friends, your relatives, your neighbors? Are they all rich? Are they all from one community? Are they all from economic class? And if they are all from that economic class, means that you are in some way discriminating, such as the societal structure in which you are operating. So we can make some extra time to teach students about human rights. If we can't make that extra time, and if we can make that extra time, on top of that, whenever we are teaching about any particular subject, we can teach every subject with the perspective of human rights. So that's how I'd like to answer.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Our next question comes from Mr. Brian.
Good evening, sir. A democracy is the rule of the majority, but often human rights of minorities suffer. Do you think there is a better system? Thank you, sir.
Right. So I had initially planned to speak upon this whole issue of democracy, but the time didn't permit, and I wasn't able to revise my notes. What you have said, Mr. Brian, is, I believe, most respectfully, is incorrect. There is a difference between democracy and mob rule. If we talk about democracy as what people have commonly started understanding democracy as, that is a rule by the majority, and that's not what democracies are. Every democracy entails a certain fundamental rights for all human beings. So if you talk about any of the democracies today in the world, they all have human rights. They all have fundamental rights. In the absence of fundamental rights, to every member of the society, it simply becomes a number game. The problem of 99, it quickly turns into utilitarianism. So we have to emphasize that democracy does not mean that the majority of the people can decide to behave with the minorities in whichever manner they wish to behave. That's not democracy. That's simply mob rule. So it's not all right. And another thing, if we look upon the history, we would notice that many of the autocrats, many of the worst dictators have chosen this way of democracy. So Hitler was democratically elected. Some of the most fanatic parties in the Middle East are coming after the dictators were toppled, and they are democratically elected. So can this be the meaning of democracy? It isn't. Democracy does not mean majoritarianism. There is a difference. Democracy means that will of the majority, but certain basic minimum fundamental rights to everybody, which are non-discrimination, which are all the freedom of speech, freedom of life, freedom of movement. So you can't deprive anyone with these rights. That's what democracy means.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Our last question comes from Ms. Shobna.
Good evening, sir. My question is, you work in this field of human rights for quite some time. Is there a good measure of success in this field?
Madam, I haven't been able to hear your question.
Okay. You have worked in this field of human rights for quite a long time now. My question is there a measure of success in this field? When you fight for human rights, when you work for it, what do you think is a measure of success seen in the field?
Right. I understand the question was, there were two questions involved. Is there success in human rights field? And what do I think is the measure of success?
Yes.
This is a bit of a subjective question. Now, success simply means, if one has to put any manner of objectivity, success simply means being able to do in a good way, in a large way, whatever it is that you do. So if I'm a doctor, success for me means being a good doctor, operating well on patients, saving people's lives. If I'm a painter, success means that painting well, creating masterpieces. So that's the true understanding of success which I believe to be. Is there success in human rights? If this is what success means, of course, there is a lot of success in human rights. I feel I have been able to do in my own way quite a lot, so I feel content with myself. Now, the second understanding of success, which is unfortunately common in society today, success in terms of recognition for the work that you do, success in terms of how much money can you make. Is there, if you take success in terms of recognition, is there success in human rights field? I would say that this is not what your definition of success should be. This is not what you should be working towards. But objectively answering, yes, there is a lot of recognition in human rights, and we know a lot of people, and lots of individuals are winning all manner of prizes, and they are recognized. More than that, all these individuals who have worked hard for human rights, who have worked hard for the communities in which they exist, they may or may not have received some grand awards from grand organizations, and they may or may not be rich, but we know that they are very respectful individuals. I had mentioned the name of Father Stan Swami. Well, I'm not sure how many awards he has received, and I haven't looked at his CV. And I'm not saying this because I'm invited to this particular platform or to this particular school, but we do have this deep respect for him. And if I were to encounter him, he's much more respectful to me and my colleagues than some high-ranking government official, naturally. So there is a success of that kind. Lastly, about success in terms of money. Is there a lot of money in human rights? Well, if you're a human rights activist and you are very, very rich, I mean, I wear my politics on my sleeve, I will be judging you. That if money is what you want to make, how come you are here? Is there money in human rights? Unfortunately, yes. Human rights today, it all really depends upon your commitment. You have human rights activists who do not have money at all, and in a very low economy, they manage to do their work. And you have human rights activists which are far more comfortable. The last thing I would like to say is to put some of the burden off from some of the students. When I make a request to them to become a human rights activist, I am not inviting them to a life of want and misery. It's not that. If you're a human rights activist, a human rights lawyer, teacher, and you work for human rights, you are not going to starve. You will have a comfortable house, you'll have a comfortable life, you will have a comfortable school. You may not have the utter luxury. You may not be earning 90 crores per hour, as some of the industrialists in our country have been making during this pandemic, when people were dying of hunger and people were dying of starvation, when people were walking thousands of kilometers. So there is every measure of success in human rights field. You may not be a millionaire, but if you want to be a millionaire, this is not the profession for you. And secondly, like I said, that we should stop looking towards human rights as a profession, but as a commitment which each one of us in our respective field has to make. If you are not a full-time activist, you can be a teacher and a human rights activist. You can be a lawyer and a human rights activist. You could be a principal and human rights activist. You could be a government officer and a human rights activist. So it's not a profession, but if you take it as a profession, yes, there is success. Yes, there is recognition. Yes, there is satisfaction. And yes, there is money too, but not too much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for the invigorating session and for quenching our curiosities. Though we would have loved to carry on this conversation, paucity of time binds us. Before we conclude today's webinar, I request Ms. Annie Dilemma to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening to one and all. Gratitude is the fairest blossom which springs from the soul. As we come to the end of today's program, I would like to thank those who have contributed to the success of this webinar on human rights. First and foremost, an enormous thank you to God Almighty for the blessings He has showered upon us, without which none of this would be possible. I would like to thank and express our profound gratitude to the speaker, Advocate Choudhary Ali Zia Kabir, for not only sparing his invaluable time and accepting to be the guest speaker for this webinar, but also for enlightening us with his commendable talk on the subject, human rights. The presentation was interesting and inspirational. Thank you, sir. We extend our deepest thanks to our principal, Reverend Father Sunil Fernandez. He has been the catalyst that inspired the conducting of this webinar and has been a constant pillar of support. Father, we are ever grateful to you. Conducting this webinar would not have been possible without the zealous efforts of the PTA committee members. Our sincere thanks to each one of you. A word of appreciation to our Vice Principal, Mr. Uday Kumar, and the team of teachers who are responsible for organizing today's program. Heartfelt gratitude to the IT team, Mr. Roshan and Mr. Muni Raju, for their technical and logistic support so that we could have an uninterrupted and wider coverage. Last but not the least, a special thank you to you, dear parents and well-wishers, for your contributions, unwavering support, and participation in every online event conducted by the school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Annie. As we close this virtual gathering, we would like to remind you once again that COVID-19 is still a danger. Please continue to take safety measures of wearing masks, sanitizing, and maintaining physical distance. Stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you all for listening in. Have a pleasant evening.